Guys, let me ask you some questions. I love participation. It's really hard on an audience this size. So if you want to raise your hand, you raise your hand. And if you don't worry about it, okay? Who has a working VDI environment and they're happy with it? One hand, two hands, three hands, right? Did I see it right? I said happy with it. That was yeah. This is like, if you ask me if I have a happy marriage, I'll say yes. My wife, don't ask her. Second question, who has a thin client environment and is happy with it? One guy, good. Two. Half happy, half environment. Okay, both. Okay, who has more than one type of phone that they're managing? So BlackBerries and iPad, and iPhones or whatever. Good stuff. Okay, Macs in their environment. Good stuff. Okay, I think this will be good. Look, let me be super honest with you, which is never good in a conference, okay? This is not a marketing presentation. This is not a product presentation. And the demo that I have is a recorded video because I'm not going to carry with the size of data center that I need to show you how every environment feels like. So with all due respect to you and to me, it's just to show you how it feels. Is that cool? So no, I'm not here to run the master demo, the keynote. I'm not a VP. I don't have 7 people to help me. I wanted to record something. So between Jeff Johnson, my colleague, and I, we recorded all the scenarios. We put them in 10 minutes. Obviously, the demo is cut down so that you can see everything, have no wait times. But it's also so that you can get it with the PowerPoint deck. So it's embedded. And I hope you can get it there, okay? Because we submitted it that way. Also, the other thing that you're going to see is that my role, my name is Eduardo Kastner. My role in Microsoft is very simple. I talk to 6, 7, 8 customers a week, all around the world, and I talk back to the product groups. So my role is really talking to good people like you and understanding how you're using the technology in your environments. And I go back to the mothership and I say, no, we got it wrong. We should go this way. We should go that way. So that's what a strategist is. And it's actually a very cool job. But the most interesting thing is I don't think I have an opinion about technology anymore because I've been doing this for 7 years. And after you talk to so many people, what you get is a consolidated opinion. You see my point? So I don't think this deck is my opinion, with all due respect to you. It's a ton of research, and you'll get all the sources. Trust me, I like my sources. You'll see it in a second. But what you'll see mostly is that it is a consolidation of a lot of the things that I see happening out there. It is the same thing as if you would talk to, 200, environments, 100, 500, you choose a number, I'm good with it. So let's start. You guys ready? Yes, good. I love the excitement. So, let's see if we agree. I hate standing here. I'm sorry, guys. I like a little bit more personal. What's the evolution? Well, we all know that we started from physical locations, one fixed screen, and then something happened interesting here. Some people said the phone would replace everything. It didn't. It's not a question, by the way. It didn't. It got added. And then other people said we're going to get 10,000 screens. And let me ask you a question. And you guys get all the gadgets, okay? So you're not necessarily the director of finance of your company, right? So let's see this. How many gadgets do you carry? 2? 3? How many people carry 4 gadgets? Raise your hand. Look how few hands are out there. This is really interesting. How many people carry around? And when I say carry around, I mean all the time. Okay, I don't mean because you traveled here, you brought something to watch your movies. No, we all do that. That's fine. I'm talking about, all the time. How many people carry 2 things? Laptop and cell phone. Everybody. 3 things? I mean, look at this. It's not just me. Look around. It's interesting. It's very few. So it's mostly consolidated on 2 things. A mobile device, whatever you want to call it, and a place where you work. And let me tell you something. This is not your desktop anymore. You're messed up if you think it is. This is a table. Your desktop is this thing here. Do you agree with me or not? Now, you think that I'm joking because you say, no, but I'm in IT, so that's my desktop. It's obvious. Talk to the accounts payable manager. That's his desktop too, today, in 99% of our environments. Obviously, we're going to get somebody like, U.S. Army, NATO, or somebody's going to say, no, my 99% is in the field in a war zone. That's fine. But for the rest of the companies, most of the desktops have turned into that screen, the size of that screen. So the next thing that's interesting is, what's happened with devices? Well, it's been an explosion. And the magazines, with all due respect to them, they want to focus on the latest and greatest. And I agree with that. But you have to understand one thing. This explosion of devices should have represented itself when I asked you if you carry 3 or more devices. Agreed or disagreed? You see my point? All of a sudden, we're talking about you carrying 17 devices, and you still have only 2 pockets and 1 bag. So it gets interesting. It gets really interesting. And then something else happens, which is we don't necessarily want to recognize that everybody else in the office, and the office could be 80% of your environment, but most likely it'll be 20% of your environment. Am I good on that one? So most likely the corporate offices or the corporate environment, it's not going to be 80% of your environment, but it's going to be 20%. And with that said, this is still interesting because it's still dependent on 1 or 2 screens. And then we have everybody else. And we don't want to talk about this, guys, because there's no cachet on that. It's not chic. It's not nice. It's not pretty. Maybe you don't believe me. Let me put it in pictures. That today's power user, and why did I say today's power user? Because maybe this is maybe this is also today's teenager. And tomorrow he will be in the office with 17 devices. But today, the power user has, 3, 4, 5, 6 devices. And it's just not you and IT. It's many people in the organization. But this is, again, a relatively small number versus the corporate environment versus the deskless worker or the task worker, which in many senses, whatever you want to call him, this is the guy who works at the cashier, that works on the factory line, that works in the help desk, that works in the... He's based on going somewhere, and that's his workspace. Now, maybe you say to me, I'm a mixture between one and the other. What we have found out through some research is that most people, research I mean not only me asking a ton of people, but what we've seen the trends of the analysts, is that most of the people are still hanging on to the back of the pack there. So the population is mostly still either task worker or beginning of office worker. And the interesting thing is if you look at the explosion of devices, consumerization says that this is going to get pushed through. Now, how fast, how much? Well, I still think that people are people, and I still think that 2 pockets are 2 pockets, right? So until we don't grow either more pockets on the pants, or people change their amount of hands and ears and eyes, you may not get more than 2 or 3 devices. Because I'm sorry to say, it's just not comfortable. Now, the other thing that's interesting is the potential exposure is what I want you to be aware of. Because this is a talk about corporate something, right? About business something. Not necessarily talking to you about the consumer environment, although that is affecting deeply, and it'll be in every single slide that I talk to you, the effect of it. But the potential exposure is something that we need to take more seriously, with all due respect. We need to understand that somebody carrying an email, a file, how dangerous can it be? Well, in a country, about 4 years ago, a very respected large country, somebody stole a USB stick of 8 gigs, the whole Social Security with credit cards. So, again, it is exposure that you should be talking about more than configuration in a sense, because exposure is what would drive configuration. With that said, let's talk about what happens today. Well, everybody has their closet full of stuff. I didn't say junk. I know you thought about it, but it's your fault, not mine, okay? I said you have a closet full of stuff. And some of the stuff is brand new and beautiful, and some of the stuff is old as hell, and you don't want to recognize it, and that's fine, okay? But you know what? That's not the problem we have. The problem we have is users have the same complaints for one reason. Because 1 hour after the device leaves IT, we lose most of the control on that device. Do you agree or not? Thank you. Some people say, sort of. Some people say, I have it under control. And some people say, yes, I do. The interesting thing is, what is this maybe sort of, maybe yes, I do? Because if you lose control of it, what control did you lose? Configuration, performance, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what we all agree with, and I haven't had, maybe I'll find here, but I haven't had one single person that told me, no, that's not my case, is we don't really have control over the user satisfaction. It can be up, down, sideways, and we really don't have a good idea of if that's the right case or not. And the solution to this is beautiful, right? I own a house, I'm terrible managing it, or I'm wonderful managing it. What's the solution to make me better? Let's buy another 3 houses. You see my point? Getting more exposure, getting more landscape doesn't make you a better gardener, right? So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm going to position and show you a ton of ideas. And I am expecting, in the very good and respectful sense, that not only you're as smart as I am, that you're smarter than I am. So you make your own point of view, okay? But I'm going to expose you to a ton of ideas. And I hope that we get to a conclusion together. So what's the next one? Well, it looks like a clear future. It looks like we're all going in the same direction. And like this direction is really clear. Because we all have this existing processes and tools and environment, but then something wonderful happens. All these options come along. And you see how the road looks beautifully straight ahead? There's one single problem. Stay with me on this one. Is it the same thing if I say consumerization than if I say thin client? Oh, you see my point. It ain't a straight road ahead. It's different exits on the highway, buddy. So if you're trying to get off on the consumerization one, you are not determining what device is coming to your environment. Well, yes, I am, but I'm doing a short list. Good for you, but you're still not thin. You see my point? And thin is an architecture, not a device. Agreed? So that's the point. The point is you cannot talk about green and consumerization. There are some of these aspects that conflict with each other. You can enable a little bit of each, maybe. You can have all of them in your environment, a little bit of it, yes. But they are conflicting, some of them with the other. And the other interesting thing is, for the last 20 years, we've had one solution. And I'm not criticizing you. I was a CIO for 9 years, and I can tell you one thing. I did this for 9 years, okay? So it's not a small amount of time. Here goes. What was my solution to all this problem? Flicker away. Buy something different. I'm not criticizing you. I'm telling you what I've seen is let's buy something different. Let's go from a this type PC to a that type PC to a non-PC to a whatever PC. I've been called a fat PC. There's thin PCs. Let's go to any single one that you want. And you know what? My solution, and this is the conclusion of the talk on the 3rd slide, just in case you have no idea where I'm going in 5 more slides. Okay, so this is the conclusion. This is the thought that I'm trying to promote to you. Forget this and answer these 4 questions for you correctly. Correctly means to your satisfaction, okay? Not to anybody else's, to your satisfaction. And the question is, who's going to do what? Where are they going to do that? And how do you enable it? Let me speak in IT terms. Which role or function is going to do what task or process? In which function or application? And how are you going to enable identity security management and compliance? Is this good? This is what we need to be answering. Not how many more devices of what do we buy. Because you know what? End of the day, if you answer these 4 questions correctly, whatever you end up buying, I assure you is going to be the right strategy. You see my point? Because you have the same purpose and the same alliance to the objective of your company. And if your company is an airline and they want to sell more tickets, then guess what? You will be aligned. Let me give you a little bit more. I'm not talking about a desktop strategy anymore. I'm talking about a flexible work strategy. I'm talking about somebody that can actually read their email on their 3 devices and not break anything in your configuration. And for you to know that he has 3 devices. And for you to know that you agree with the compliance of the data that exists on these 3 devices. And for you to be able to wipe one when he loses it. Am I going in the right direction? That's the point. So, Let's talk about some statistics. This one's always kill me because always people think that I'm against somebody. I'll say it straight. I have no preference over any architecture, okay? I'm agnostic. You know the difference between agnostic and atheist? Is agnostic doesn't care. Okay? I'm agnostic. I don't mind. And I want you to understand something. Thin client was 1% of the market in 1999, and it is 1% of the market in 2010. You surprised? Okay, let's go on. What about VDI? 1.5%. Sorry, forgot to put the percentage here. Don't believe me. Read the articles. That's why I put the sources, okay? So don't get me wrong. So 1.5%. Now, everybody says, well, I expected it to be more. We all did. Gartner expects it to be 25% or 17%. You see my point? Fine, fine. Whenever it gets there, I'll show you that statistic. I don't have a preference, but what I'm trying to show you is there is reason and rhyme to this, right? Let's think about it for a second. And whatever you're thinking, I agree, okay? In other words, there is reason why this hasn't exploded. You'll tell me the reasons later. I'm good with that. And the next one is 354 million, while there are some that say that this is going to grow to 415 million, or the number is already that. Remember, this is always, I don't want to say an estimate, but a measurement that's done on the supply and demand side by all the different analysts. The next one is interesting. After 10 years, it's still 1%, even after 4 years of VDI. And some people could argue VDI has been out there for 5 years or 6, and I'm good with that one too, okay? Look, it's not that I don't want to be exact, but I'm trying to tell you, however you spin these numbers, they're talking to you very clearly. Is that good? And look at the next one. But do me a favor, stand either next to a mic so everybody can hear you, or...
I guess, are they saying that 1% is exclusive, like I am total thin client, nothing else?
No. This is users. This is not even devices. This is users. So I could have measured devices, and that comes from a Gartner article, by the way, and I grabbed the number of users. So it's even larger. It's 15 to 17 million users. They're not telling you how many you should have. They're telling you in the market, from what they got from their analysis, there were 17 million. Now you divide 17 million by 354 million, you get 1.5%. You see my point? Again, this is good because that's what I'm trying to promote, and you're hitting it on the head. It is, I'm trying to tell you, look at the numbers because you'll see what the market is, what actually people are consuming, right? More than what vendors are selling or not, this is what the market is consuming. And then on the other side, there's this article from Gartner that says something that I love, is if you look at the last 25 articles, you'll find out one thing. And there, at the end, I'll give you the source for all the articles I've used, okay? You'll find out one thing, which is incredible. It is, there is no necessarily benefit over, so TCO benefit, from one configuration to the other. I love that the article points at thin versus thick. But let me explain something. What these guys are saying is something super simple. The difference between thin and thick can be 2% if they're well managed. So if you compare well managed to well managed, in fact, there you go, VDI. Because you say, well, I don't have thin, but I'm interested in VDI. Same thing here. With thin client, the studies say 2%. With VDI, the studies say 2%. In other words, if you have a well-managed environment and you go to a well-managed VDI environment, your TCO benefit is going to be 2%. So you're going to say that's not enough. Well, but it's not about that. That's the point. If you went to VDI for TCO, you may not get that. But if you went to VDI for flexibility, absolutely, you're going to get that. Okay? So remember, some of the benefits that are out there are very tangible, but some others are just absolutely not. And I encourage you to listen to them and do some more research if you're interested, or go through the sources that I'm giving you so that you get some of these myths taken away. And then the last one is interesting. Application virtualization gives you between 5 and 7% TCO benefit, and this is the only numbers and analyst TCO slide I have, okay? Don't think this is going to be the whole deck. But this one really surprised me because there's a couple of things that application virtualization promotes, which is extremely good. One is application certification, or application lifecycle management, however you want to call it. And if I force you to do something good, like in my case, go to the doctor, change your diet and go to the gym, guess what? Who do I blame that I'm getting thinner and fitter? Well, it's the whole thing that you're doing, right? You may blame that you bought this technology, but the truth is that you're using this technology that's giving you those benefits. So having a real-time inventory, having a real-time application lifecycle management process, which is what this will help you enforce, that's what drives this 5 to 7% benefit, amongst other things. So let's start with different architectures. I would highly recommend, and this is one of the few slides that has followed me during the last 7 years that I've been doing this type of material and this type of analysis. And it is because I still believe it to be absolutely truth, and I apologize if anybody has seen it before. Look, it says one thing. If you put VDI, thin client, diskless, or if you put blade PCs, or if you put just a regular managed client, or if you put a slate or a phone, you need to ask 4 questions. The first question is, where does it run? Does it run in the data center? Is it a 3-tier model? Is it a 2-tier model? Does it run on the client, right? Second question is, what was it developed under? And you can put here whatever you want, whichever protocol you want. You can say .NET, or you can say Java, or you can say, I like Ajax, because most people don't talk about that, and most people use it on their web applications. So, you see, not all devices run all types of code. You cannot run 7 types of .NET code on a Windows phone, whatever, but neither can you run it on an iOS, or, you see my point, you can run certain versions. Then you also have the third question, which is, how is it presented? Is this just pure HTTP, HTML? Is this a foundation class? How is it presented? And the last one is, does it belong to a stack? Example, VoIP, right? Voice over IP, that would be a stack. Or SharePoint with Office, right? Connectors, that's a stack. So if you say yes to any of these, this is what you're doing. Do you agree with me? You're saying they can run on some, but not on all. The only one that's flexible enough, and I'm not saying that it is the best, I'm just saying that it is the most flexible, is a regular PC, which has its benefits and its downfalls, like anything else. So it's very simple. One size doesn't fit all. And I think this is the idea that most people do not want to follow. And let me get stuck here for 2 seconds. I'm trying to say something simple. Until we in IT, with all due respect to you, realize that this just give the same device to everybody, or the same 2 devices to everybody works because of simplicity, until we don't get away from this, we're not noticing that the users are running us over with a train with this exact message. Do you agree? They're saying, no, I don't want the same device as that guy, I have a different function. I want this type of device. And you know what they do? They go and buy it. And they go and use it, and they don't tell you. And then you have all kinds of good exposure, whether it's good or bad. So the point is, no, one size does not fit all, and that world is absolutely over. So, this one is a simple one. Many people ask me through different conversations, what's the effort? So I sat down, I ain't kidding you, with 5, customer environments that I really respect. I mean, you start talking to people, eventually you become, close to them, and I asked them, would you be willing to just give me your opinion? And then I grabbed 10 people from the different product groups. And we started going into what's the effort. So we divided the effort in 3 boxes. The first box is called centralized infrastructure management. What you need on your data center to manage any of these environments, okay? Sustain them, enable them, whatever. The next one is building that environment, and the last one is maintaining that environment. So the first one obviously has directory, perimeter security, storage. Storage is a big, important one, okay? Whether it be distributed or centralized. And most people are not paying as much attention as they should into that one. That's why I'm calling your attention. And then you have, obviously, device security, monitoring, remote support, network bandwidth. And when I say network bandwidth, it's just network management, okay? Or bandwidth management, or access management. It's all those in that one box, okay? And then you have, obviously, application certification, lifecycle management with image building. And the last piece of this is always deployment, patching, and inventory management, or inventory. Apologize for my accent. So, we have proven over the past 15 years that we can do relatively low effort into some of these guys and we'll have a working environment. Agreed? So you don't have to go crazy, you don't have to do everything. I mean, some people do everything and they have really good environments, and some people do very, very little and they have so-so environments, but the effort is you don't have to put everything into this, right? But then what happens when you go to, how many people here have terminal services or Citrix? Please, almost everybody raise it. Exactly. Would you agree with me, and please just, nod your head if you want, that it requires more effort? Applications may collide. Network is an issue now, right? Server storage may be an issue. Server farm may be an issue. So all of a sudden you face all these different added things that you didn't have before. It's not that it's a good or a bad thing. It is you need that flexibility, and you correctly pay the price. So some of these things become more critical. What happens when you go VDI? It is exactly the same thing with one exception. What's the exception? Storage management. All of a sudden, let's say you have 5,000 PCs in your environment, okay? And I'm talking about a relatively small environment for many of you. 5,000 PCs. It's all of a sudden 5,000 disks spinning in one data center in one single location with I don't know how many fiber channel connections you put into it, and you didn't necessarily aggregate them for performance. Maybe you just did them for redundancy. You see my point? Versus having the 5,000 of them existing somewhere else, running independently and not having a throughput problem. So what's interesting about this is you are adding, you're not taking away. And last but not least, what about a phone? I love the example about phones. Did you know that we're a lot more dyslexic on a phone than we are on any other device? Let me explain. I pick up the phone and I wait for it to boot up. Right? Wrong. I pick it up. If I can make a phone call immediately, 3 seconds is too long. I drop this thing to the garbage, I go buy a new one, right? You see my point? You have no patience on a phone. You have some more patience on any other device. But on a phone, there's just no patience. In fact, if I open an application on my phone and I want to do something, it's the same amount of patience. None. So application compatibility management, application lifecycle management, bandwidth, throughput, application availability become massively more critical. You see what I'm saying here? It is a different type of behavior that's driving a different type of environment management. And now, what about the life cycle of these things? Well, I was super kind and put 3 to 8 years. Most of you understand that after 5 years, you start going downhill. Some people choose 6, 7. There you go. I was kind enough and I said 3 to 8 years. Fine. What happens with a phone? How many years does a phone work? I still have phones from 1990 whatever that work. But if I turn them on, I get no signal. And that's massively interesting. Because we say, no, on a thin client, which is super similar to a phone, think about it. On a thin client, I'm going to last forever on this thing. And then you realize that the actual rate at which we go through phones, tablets, and many other devices of this kind is way, 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 way faster than what you do with a regular PC. And I challenge you to think about that. Because also some of these devices don't support the whole stack as it moves forward. Okay? And you can't upgrade them. You can't change anything in them. Just like you can change the antenna on your phone, you can't change the the graphical processing unit on your tablets, right? Whether they be whichever brand, don't get me wrong. If you're thinking Android, I'm fine with that. And if you're thinking an iPad, I'm fine with that too. And if you're thinking Windows tablet, I don't believe you, but I'm fine with that too. I got half a laugh. That's good already. Don't tell anybody I did that. So what's the effect of server-based client computing on the existing data center? I love this. This is like the biggest words I've said all week. What's the effect if you change any architecture, right, in your data center? Go with me, walk with me, it's interesting. Number one, the obvious thing, you get more servers and more storage in your data center. Duh, we all get that. And then obviously you need more power and cooling. Yes, that was obvious. Well, what happens now? You have to change your thinking. This is where it becomes absolutely non-obvious. You start thinking of density per port. Let me repeat that. You now have to start thinking how many clients are connected per port on the server. And if you're not careful with this one, it's going to bite you back. Okay? And these guys have a crocodile mouth. They bite hard. Okay? And the next one is, what about your storage? Because like I said, now it's 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 users connecting to a SAN or to a set of SANs, storage area networks, or NAS or whatever you chose. But now throughput is massively important. And when I say throughput, I did not mean resiliency or redundancy. I meant aggregated throughput. Okay? And when you're thinking on this, chew on this idea for a second. We're talking about storms. What's a storm? The boot storm at 9:30, 9, 8:30, whatever you want in the morning, 7 in the morning. The login storm after lunch. The scan storm after a virus hits you. And yes, we still have viruses in every environment, believe it or not. And last but not least, maybe a compliance storm. You see my point? This gets just interesting and interesting and interesting. And the next one is you got to be very, very careful now about your bandwidth. Your branch environments, your remote environments should really be very, very clear. Some people tell me, because I'm from Mexico and I've worked in Latin America for a long, long time, people say, no, up in Canada, up in the US, some of the things are different. Well, I was in Winnipeg in November, and from anybody from Winnipeg, no disrespect, I don't recommend it. It's something like minus 45 without a windshield factor. And don't tell me the network conditions are marvelous at those temperatures. So my point is, you really have to take care that this strategy works for you. Now, look, I, again, am not saying do this or don't. I'm saying when you do this, plan accordingly. That's my message, okay? It is planned correctly so that you're successful. The next one is simple. You have now more sensitivity to, obviously, to bandwidth, to redundancy, and to quality of service. And finally, all this falls into configuration management and into application lifecycle management. Now, you tell me, why is this slanted? Well, because it's a hill. If you change the applications your users are going to use, and maybe you change your bandwidth requirements or your access to disk or your et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, guess what? We all fall down. We all go back to step 0, and you've got to rethink it. Not massively, not completely, but you should. What does this affect? Well, it affects your workload shift. In other words, if you have 50 field engineers working with you, or you're a field engineer, well, does this mean that you get fired? Absolutely not. If anybody does that, they'd be completely out of their mind. It means that now you're going to go work in the data center as an application lifecycle management engineer. You see my point? There is a workload shift that everybody is living, that they're experiencing this type of architectural changes. And the next one that's happening is you got to rethink your management tools because they are not the same. You may think it's still config manager. Yes, it may still be config manager plus something. You see my point? You don't take away, you just add. Because you changed the house. You didn't change the person that lived in it. You see my point? Again, I'm moving my stuff from one house to another house, but I'm not changing my stuff. And that's the difference. And last but not least, you definitely have to rethink your processes. So, where did I get these crazy ideas? Was it just me hitting myself on the toilet and thinking of the flux capacitor, for those of you who are my age? Good. There's a lot of people my age here. Back to the Future was the quote, man. There's 5 good articles from Gartner that I recommend that you read if you're more interested in why I said this, okay? So no, nothing that I'm saying comes out of the blue. I'm actually doing some research here. What's the recommendation? So enough of this, cloud casting and why is it difficult and why isn't it difficult? Well, they're not saying any architecture. I changed the quote. This is not a quote. This is me paraphrasing, and I changed it because somebody said thin, somebody said fat, smart, some of this said VDI. I changed it, and I love when you say any architecture. So stay with me, okay? Don't read if you don't want to. Any architecture includes all management. You don't get rid of anything because of moving from one architecture to the other. Any architecture does not cure your poor processes. So if you have good processes, you take them with you. But guess what? If you have poor processes, they come with you too. Also, any architecture requires more tools and different skills, as well as not every support structure that is existing today is appropriate for the new ones. Think about when you got into Citrix or terminal services, okay? It is not exactly the same thing. And that delta is what makes you successful or a failure. And there are entry costs. Many people, I always ask this question, and there's very few people who actually think about this one up front, and I love to put it up front. Is it legal in your environment? Because, look, this is not, is it legal in the US? Is it legal in the US in the healthcare market as a Blue Cross Blue Shield provider? That's the question, okay? Is it legal, et cetera, to provide a device that contains customer data which is not encrypted? And if your answer is no, then guess what? You can't do customization. Did he just say that? Oh my Lord. Yes, I said that. What I'm trying to tell you is, if your hard drive, you can't assure that it has TPM and you can't encrypt it, then I'm sorry, you can't encrypt it. And if you can't be compliant with your own regulatory compliances for your company, then you see my point where I'm driving? You can't conflict with your own business requirements. Therefore, you should look at them. I didn't say it's a good thing or a bad thing, but you should look at them and consider them first, before technology. Okay, biggest factor is TCO. Then definitely understand one thing, and this is one of the most powerful articles I've read on this. If you manage any environment, 36% cheaper, okay? If you don't manage any environment, 36% more expensive. Fine? And last but not least, VDI, thin client, is not appropriate for all users. It is appropriate for populations within any company. We've said this many, many times. We've been misquoted. We've been misunderstood. People say they don't like. No, listen, we love it. We're just trying to say don't use one size fit all, because we've seen it for too long. Remember, we've been doing this desktop game for 30 years, with all due respect. Okay, right tool for the right job. So, I love to do this two thin client slides because many people come and they ask me, so thin client is this device? And I say, no, you got it right and you got it wrong. It ain't a device, it is an architecture. You can do thin client many, many, many ways. And some of those ways are extremely useful and extremely creative. Like, you can grab thin clients, which is a traditional desktop, which you just absolutely restrict the hell out of it. Fine? And then in that desktop, you let the help desk user do two things, and that's it. And you let any user who wants sign in, or a branch of a bank, right? And that's fine. Yes, but I want to change it for another one that I have right in the closet. If I configure it that way, then you just go ahead and do it. But I want it to cost $600. There's PCs that cost $600. Are you talking about against thin clients? No. I said you can do them either road A or you can do them road B. You see my point? I just told you it's not necessarily one way and that's it. That's all I'm saying. And you can also do it, it's not WinFlip anymore, it's what is it, thin PC, yeah, I forgot the new name. Nikhil, which is the product manager of it, is going to kill me. He told me to say it correctly. You guys don't tell him, okay? Long story short, you can do this three ways. And if you want to understand what I'm trying to say, it's very simple. There's some scenarios that are going to be better with just a regular restrict the hell out of it PC. There's going to be some scenarios that are fantastic for a small terminal type thin client device. And there's going to be some environments that are just incredible for a slate, whatever you want that to be. Is that good? Why don't we call slates a thin client if they behave almost as such? Or phones, right? And that makes them so much easier to understand, by the way. Long story short, there's 4 levels of hell. Dante said 7 or 9. I say 4. You choose, okay? The purple one, that's where all the lion, tigers, and bears exist. Fine? And you have devices like some Androids and maybe an earlier iPhone that you can't do anything to it, right? I mean, it doesn't matter with whose tool, you can't do anything to it. So if you can't do anything to it, but maybe, access it basically, then that's lion, tigers, and bears, okay? But then there's some phones that you can almost domain join, right? And there hasn't been yet a phone that is full corporate managed. What do I mean by that? That has IPsec, VPN, smart carding, and or biometrics. Agreed? Where I have all the options. But some phones you can take almost all the way to domain joined. Now there's other phones, there's slates, and slates mostly live in the world of basic profiling. So that's the blue circle, the first dark blue circle. And that's where I can at least remote wipe it, inventory what they have, and maybe push some good applications to it. And then there's obviously some other tablets that I can do corp join, right? Obviously, I have the embedded devices. Embedded devices live mostly between corp domain joined and corp joined. The difference between those two, as you can see, is domain joined is what we're all doing. Corp joined is what you would do for more secure devices. Maybe IPsec again and stuff like that. Netbooks, well, there's a, I don't know if you know, but a Hannah Montana Linux, which is a Ubuntu version, and you can't do much with that. It's not that, I have anything against Ubuntu. I'm just trying to say it won't let you, right? It's not designed for that, with all due respect to that version of Ubuntu. And then you have other versions, I don't know, a full Windows, whatever, that you can corp join it. Last but not least, you have desktops and laptops that you can probably corp join it and even domain join them full. My point to you is very simple. Decide what's the level of trust that you want this user to have, his function, his role, his profile, whatever you want to call it, okay? And then decide which type of devices you're going to enable him with. Because if you do it the other way around, you see my point. You're probably selecting a device that you're going to want to have more level of access or less, or level of trust or less, than you actually end up with. And this is how we get into trouble. Because we're not planning the other way around, in my humble opinion. Okay. Is this good so far? Useful? Thank you. Let me ask you a question. Answer this question. It is for you. Don't tell me the answer, but definitely answer it. Because if you don't answer it, honestly, we're messing up the whole strategy. The answer is, how good are you at image management, patch management, inventory, role profile personas, deployment, and application lifecycle management? 90% of the people that I talk about this is where they flop, right? Everything else you could say, well, maybe I'm good here, maybe I'm good there, but most of the people I talk to here, that's where they fall down. And you know why am I saying this? Because once you say, I'm good or bad at this, right, at this collection of activities, of processes, and if you will, I call them desktop configuration. Some people say, well, the only thing you're missing there is acquisition and purchasing, and I agree. But outside of that, I can build almost anything out of these stack, if you notice. I can build security out of this, configuration management, almost anything. Well, if you answer that, the question for you is the following. What changes, and this is, I want you to think about this, please. What changes if you go from one architecture to another? Which process out of these processes do I drop or do I do less of? None. You don't do less of anyone. At best, you do a little bit more of one or another. And therefore, my other question to you is the following. Where's it cheaper? Because if you could have made it cheaper on the desktop, couldn't you have made it cheaper on the desktop also, in the server? Or vice versa? You see my point. If you could have made it cheaper on the server, couldn't you have done it back there? So is it really a location problem? Sorry, I called it so simplistically. Well, with that said, let me bring you back to the quote I said at the beginning. The biggest factor of cost on any PC environment, desktop environment, flexible desktop, or whatever, desktop as in whatever you have there, is managing that environment and locking the users. Does that mean locking profiles? No, it means locking the user. It means you decide what they will be able to do via several methods. So I'm not talking a specific function of group policy or password policy or user type. I'm talking about all the above. Fine? With that said, let's look at what it takes to build a structurally well-managed desktop. And this is based on the best practices that my colleague and I have recompiled of 7 years of talking to you good people. Okay? So this is just field knowledge. Number one, understanding that there's a massive difference between you configuring the device and you configuring the person. And I'll jump around stage on this one for a bit. You want to talk about the device as in what's the minimum that this thing has to have for me to let it enter my network, right? What's the minimum that it should behave like, and what are the capabilities that it has to project? In other words, how do you want to do some inventory management on a device that cannot tell its own inventory? You see my point? Again, my accent is killing me. Its own inventory. How can you project different types of connection like remote desktop, remote applications, and or VDI environments if you don't have the clients right here? Well, it's all going to be done via web. Which browser are you using? Browsers are almost as big as operating systems nowadays, right? You see my point? What do you put on the device? How do you configure the device? How do you restrict it? How do you manage it? How do you secure it? How do you make it compliant to your requirements? And then, guess what? I got that laptop. That's already compliant. Now it's me. What am I going to do in this company? What do I have access to? I'll give you just one simple example. Let's say you want to call all your general population, including the CEO and everybody else, people. You have people, and then you have classified. What would be classified? Finance, okay? It's just one example. So everybody else, I'm not going to do what I'm going to tell you, but to these guys, I'm going to encrypt their hard drive, request a password change every 2 weeks, request that I know their last 20 passwords. You see where I'm going. So this is what I'm going to configure the user versus mass population. And that's the difference between configuring the device versus configuring the user. Now, I hope I'm giving you some ideas, because now we're going to talk about what do I put into the device. This device should have enough stuff so that I can run the different models of the different users that connect to it. Whether it be the application virtualization software so that I can use some good AppV, whether it would be the remote desktop, whether it is the antivirus, anti-malware, etc., 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 all good stuff. The next one is one we talk very scarcely of, and most people are not necessarily focusing on this one. And I urge you to think about it, which is your data strategy. Who are you going to back up? Is there a population within your users? Is there a profile that you actually have to back up? What are you going to back up? How are you going to manage their passwords? Are you going to encrypt the hard drive? Are you going to encrypt the data? Are you going to have a policy for data in rest, data in use, and data in motion? Look, I'm not trying to go super technical, and I'm not trying to stay super up. I'm trying to go in the middle so you can fill in all the gaps, because I know you guys understand the technology. What I'm trying to tell you is I'm trying to show you how some people are getting this technology to really work for them. The strategy behind it. So, what about your security policy? And this one everybody gets, so I don't need to go into this one. Most people have this one pretty right or extremely close to where they want it. Fine. If you have those 4 things well done, I humbly believe that you have a well-managed desktop. And guess what? If we start with this well-managed desktop, then you can use this guy wherever you want. This can be a VDI session. This can be a terminal services or Citrix environment. Or this can be a remote application. Or this can be just a data server serving data, financial data, to different type of clients. So, what tools can you have? Well, if we're talking about a PC, so I'll restrict myself right now only to that environment, you can talk about, application virtualization. That gives you a certain level of extraction right here, right, the application level, and it gives you some benefits. You have virtual machines running within your environment, so client-hosted virtual machines. I'm going to go super fast into this because I know you get it. You have session virtualization, which is, again, terminal services, Citrix, etc., types like that. You also have VDI, and you have the last one, which is the one I've been talking about for the last, 40 minutes, which is user state virtualization, which is controlling through profiles or policies, all of the above, right? So with that said, you can deploy this type of device to any architecture. And that's my point. So when people tell me, hey, it looks like you don't like, I like all of them. I'm just saying before you get to any of them, manage it well. Get to the point where the device is so well managed before it gets to an architecture that when it lands there, it really shines through. It really works well. If you're going to do VDI, have the best experience for your user. This guy logs on, it logs on. It doesn't wait 10 minutes. It doesn't fall down. It doesn't have intermittent mouse movements, etc., 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 right? Well, what about consumerization? A lot of people say, I have a strategy. How many people are already on a consumerization path? So they let their users bring their own PCs to work. 1, 2, 3, half, 4, 5. So 5.5. That's cool. You see, that sounds like me asking my wife to allow me to go, to the bar with my friends. She gives me half a permission. It's the half that I thought. It's half. I let them half. I like that one. I'm going to use your example, man. So, this is a story, and I'll tell it to you really fast. How did it all happen? Well, we started with a ton of servers of high business impact, medium business impact, and low business impact. And you know, this user signed in from a corporate network, and they had corporate managed devices. And this is a couple of years ago, right? And what we did to secure this environment is we said, well, if any unmanaged device comes in, we're only going to let it actually see the data and connect to this information if it has certificates, right? So the first strategy we did is add certificates. And then we said, well, no, for the high business impact, we're going to put actual terminal services, Citrix, et cetera, something to regulate who accesses and how. And then we said, fine, but now we have a problem. People are bringing all kinds of good stuff into to the environment. They're driving us crazy. So we're going to put an access gateway to control who goes where. And you say, fine, you put an access gateway. And again, this is a story looking at the rearview mirror. This is things that people have already done. But then something interesting happened, which is these devices didn't stay on the corporate network. They actually roamed around, and they wanted to see the data from anywhere. So again, we regained the access gateway, but now through a firewall, and we retained the terminal services environments for some of the most critical data. Well, to end this story, the problem we have right now is that users, you know, we want to restrict what some users see on some devices, so we want to get more granular. But even more interesting is we want users to be able to roam their devices from one environment to the other, and for this to be seamless. So all this works as long as you answer a couple of questions. Let me say this again. This is super, super, super important. As long as you answer these 4 questions to your heart's content, okay? So you say, I'm happy with my answer, then you got a good strategy. If you don't answer these 4 questions and you say, I'm happy, I'm sorry to tell you, it doesn't matter how many consultants you hire, you ain't got a good strategy. Here goes. First question. I don't care who owns the device. It is who manages the device. So first question is, who manages the data? If the user, let's say I'm a user on a government project, and I work for the dependency of road and whatever, waterworks, right? And I have the blueprints for a very important dam. If I leave my job and I take my laptop with me, because remember, the laptop is mine legally, is the information mine? Yes or not? If you can answer that one right, if you can answer the question of data in rest, data in transit, data in motion, if you can answer that one, then you got a good consumerization strategy. The next one, who manages the applications? If this guy leaves, can he take the applications with him? Can he still access? Can he still see the data? What about the device itself? Is it yours or theirs? Because if you pay for part of it, then guess what? You need to really clearly state who's the ownership of. And then last but not least, the operating system, so that you can enable everything we've been talking about for the past whatever minutes. And with that said, let's talk about some guidance. Well, what have we found? We found, believe it or not, that there's some people that are getting it super right. They're getting it exactly right, and they're very, very happy with their strategy. And we started questioning them. So what'd you do, right? What is this stuff that you're doing that's making you so successful? And we found these 4 things. The first thing is, through directory management and through compliance logging and through digital right management, they're really, really, really strongly enforcing a role profile function. However you want to call this, if you want to call this personas or profiles or group policy, you see my point. It ain't just group policy, but you see my point. You really have to get that one down. And you have to be super careful. People who have more than 15 profiles, they just shot themselves on the foot with a shotgun. Because these things get exponentially big. So you have to end up, like I said, with a couple of roles personas. Right? Just a couple. Couple, do I mean 2? I mean less than 15, okay? Less than 10, whichever number is magical for you. The second one is really have a clear and well-coordinated security strategy that enables the identity side and that comprehends the configuration side. I just gave half of you gastritis because your security area doesn't necessarily talk to your configuration management area, that doesn't necessarily talk to your identity area. Right or wrong? That's the point. If you actually get these 3 guys talking and one enables the other, these are the guys who are getting it right. The next one is do application certification, application lifecycle management, and application cataloging. If you do that through virtualization, kudos to you, you just solved one more. And if you don't do it, you still got to do it. This is like if you go to the club and swim, or you go to the club and hit the cardio machines. Well, you hit whichever you want, but go to the club, okay? And last but not least, data management. Like I said, hardware encryption policies, USB policies, backup restore. You see what I'm putting there. And what did I just say? You remember the first slide when I told you this is the conclusion? This is exactly what I'm talking about. Who's going to do what, where, and how you are going to enable them. Okay? So, that's how, in my humble opinion, I've seen several very, very good environments, some of them quite large, above 200,000 PCs, by the way, 200,000 desktops, whatever you want to call them, are enabling a flexible work environment. So, if you want to read some articles, what's the language of the articles? They say this. If you do application virtualization, data compliance, image certification, you read all that, right? If you do all that, you get the following. You get increased user environment manageability, which means efficiency, which means lower cost of ownership. So if you're looking for what's the golden apple at the end of the road, whatever you want to call it, well, that's it. But you gotta walk towards it, okay? You're not going to go there by buying any technology or buying any device. You actually have to deploy it, and you have to deploy it with this type of guidelines. Not necessarily exactly this ones, but you see the point. So, the proposal, simple. Instead of thinking of a device strategy, please think of a role strategy, and then move all the way to a device. You're still going to select several devices, as we agreed at the beginning of the talk. You're still going to end up with a diverse architecture, because that's what our evolution has taken us to. But it really matters that you understand who's going to use what where, because then you can control it. The other way around, it's hell, because anybody can bring whatever they want, and then you just end up, supporting whatever they bring in. So let's look at what is stopping you. I asked this question of a ton of people, and I got the same answer, and it was surprising, because after, that characteristic, I have twins who are 3 years old. So it's wonderful, because they're exactly hitting the age of the why. So if one child asking you why makes you mad, imagine two in tandem. This is like hitting you in redundancy, man. It's like, why? Well, I started asking this, and I got all the way to the same answer. We have one organization taking care of some of the processes that we need to be successful, another organization taking care of another, so the data center guys take care of some, the distributed systems, or whatever you call them, they take care of another, and the security guys or identity guys take care of another. And you know what? The only guys that I've seen be extremely successful in managing a flexible work environment are people who can actually cut through the silos and put this processing in place. That's the challenge. Sorry to tell you that it is not a massively incredible demo of a technology you just buy and that's it, you got it. And I can still apologize, but it's still going to be the same thing. And I think we agree. So, step one, where are you? I'm not going to show you the optimization model from Microsoft. I'm just going to show you how I use it. How I use it every time I have the luck and luxury of talking to one of you. How I use it to help you. Again, I'm not saying this is the only way, this is one way. So what do you do here? This is a PowerPoint a friend of mine and I built. I think you're going to enjoy it. It has macros in it, believe it or not. So just in case you thought PowerPoint couldn't get more complicated. So let's say I'm interviewing you and I ask you, sir, read line by line or else this is too much. Do you have standard images and manual deployment, or do you have an image library and you have automatic processes for your images? No, I have an image library. Okay. Would you like it to be layered and zero touch? Yep. Okay, good. What about your OS strategy? Do you have a consistent OS deployment strategy? Is it one or N-1 version, so not the latest version, but one before? Or is it all current version? Nope. It's actually, I have several versions, and I'd like to have just 2 versions. That sounds good, or 3. Fine. What about user profiles? I don't have them integrated. Would you like to have them drive your identity, security, and configuration? Absolutely. You see what I'm doing? That's it. That's enough. I don't need to go further. Once you start building this, what you build is where you're at and where you want to be. Not where the market is telling you to be, not what I want to sell you because there's a technology for it. It's what you want to drive for your end users, right? And all of a sudden, you're building a roadmap that's very clear because you see, once you start building the house brick by brick, sorry for the level of detail, now you literally have a strong strategy that can get you there. And this is for client management and virtualization, mainly for desktop environments. This is for non-PC, non-desktop environments. So you see, synced manually, non-PC device configured manually, phone used mainly for voice, etc. You can see the different devices here and their progression through the 4 stages of the optimization model. I know I didn't present the optimization model. The 4 stages are super simple. Unstructured is basic, okay? Structured would be standardized. Pretty good, optimized, whatever you want to say, is rationalized. And then Star Trek, Star Wars is dynamic, okay? So if you want to have, teletransporting enterprise, that's when you go dynamic. Good stuff. And this is for client security, and this is for identity and access, and this is for information protection and control. Did you notice how granular I went? So all of a sudden, you have a very clear roadmap that you sat down with the 3, 4 different areas that actually manage this, and you agreed, this is where we're at. I'll give you an example. I love this one. Manual user account provisioning and decommissioning versus limited provisioning of all the environments versus automated management. This is not single sign-on. This is not all identity synchronized. This is specifically for 2 or 3 things that affect your desktop environment or your flexible workspace environment. You see my point. But you start this way, you get a very cohesive, very clear project that you can start and end within a year, and that you can deploy, and which is the foundational piece for the next project, because there's codependencies between one and the other, as you can already appreciate. So, let's see what's possible. I'm going to show you the video, okay? We have some good time. This is my friend Jeff. This is his PC. As you can see, this is an XP environment. And he has some applications here. And you see, I'm right here, and I'm going to ping him in a second. As you can see, he has all of his data synchronized, folder synchronization, folder redirection, horrible, because it syncs at the end of the log on, log off process. But you see, I send him an email and say, hey, Jeff, would you like to move to the flexible workspace? And he says, yeah, sure, I'd love to move there. So what do you need to do? Well, just look at your documents. They've been synchronized with the server through folder redirection. Okay, so that's the first thing. So you can say, I'm going to enable this for you because I'm migrating you, right? So not all the time. Fine. Now, would you also like to try some new applications from Office 2010? And he says, yeah, why not? So what we're going to do is we're going to deploy through AppV, believe it or not, remote app, some virtual applications and some remote apps from terminal services, from Windows Server 2008 R2. So you see, there's nothing here. And all that we're going to do, so there's no new applications, and all that we're going to do is we're adding Jeff to a group policy. See, we go here to Active Directory, and we go to Jeff, and we're going to change Jeff into literally, by the way, if any of you have seen a previous version of this video, this is a newer version, so stay with me. There's a lot of new stuff in it. So we can go here and we just add him. And because application virtualization is seeing that we're adding him to this new group, as soon as, the GP update happens, he's going to get these applications. Now, what's interesting is he's going to get some applications through application virtualization, but then he's getting some other applications via remote app through terminal services. So I'm showing you 2 delivery methods of applications, okay? So as you can see here, he gets a couple links, and one of them is Internet Explorer 8. I didn't install Internet Explorer 8. This is an XP machine. It has Internet Explorer 6, but I'm giving him Internet Explorer 8 through remote app, okay? So we'll do this inversely in a second. This is a great example. So this would be forward compatibility, not backwards. And he also has, as you can see here, IE6. So there you go. He's on XP, and he has IE6 and IE8. Fine. No, we don't control what happens in the internet while we're doing these demos. If you see anything that's incorrect, it's all your fault. I'm just joking. Don't read it. So what happens now is we're going to move and show you that he's going to use some voting buttons, and he can say, yes, I want to, start using any device. By saying that, what we're doing is we're just telling him we're, like I said, remote synchronization of the folder, remote folder, and now we're going to move him to the final email, which is, now we're going to give you access to all this good stuff, and we're going to move you. So we're going to give you access to old versions of Office, the current version of Office, and the new version of Office. How we're going to do this? We're going to leave Office 2007 installed physically. We're going to give him remote app of 2010, and we're going to do app V of 2003. So again, I'm not telling you to buy 3 versions of Office for every desktop. I'm showing you what's possible. This is the whole buffet, okay? You select whatever you want from this. But this is so you can see all the crazy things you can do. So this is really cool because just by adding him to a group policy, I'm changing all his application environment, and I'm still controlling it. And I'm still deploying it. I could still be deploying all this through Config Manager or, other methods. But you can see here, now Jeff has 3 versions. Give me a second. So he has 2010, 2003. He's going to log off, and he's going to go now to a new machine. Now, hold on. Some people say, my environment is not that simple. You can't just migrate from from XP to Windows 7. There's some application compatibility. Yes. But look, I'm showing you a demo. So just see what's possible, and then you determine what are your complexities. Let's see what happens. Right now, his data is being synchronized with the folder, like I told you. He logs off of XP. And now this is Windows 7. Jeff has never signed into this machine of Windows 7. And what's massively interesting, as you can see here, administrator, is maybe some of his applications haven't streamed down as an app V. Maybe some of this, I like to call them bubbles. Many people, streamed applications haven't been downloaded yet, okay? Maybe his profile hasn't downloaded yet. Maybe some of the requirements of configuration or the encryption of the hard drive hasn't happened yet. And the security. As you can see there, only the default profile and the administrator have signed into this machine. Okay, fine. So what's going to happen now is we're going to go and we're going to see what happens the first time Jeff logs into this machine, which is 3 things I've already hinted the whole time. His application is going to stream down. He's going to get the remote apps that he has access to. He's going to have his data be copied, now synchronized. Remember, Windows 7 does this way optimally than XP. It does, all the time synchronization, and it understands bandwidth, so it doesn't hog your bandwidth. And you see, my session got opened again. So I even get some sessions. Some applications are session aware, and they'll replicate. And as you saw there, I have now Office 2003, 2007, and 2010, and I have remote app IE6. What just happened? Well, this is called profiling. What I did is I noticed that Jeff is signing into a new environment, which is Windows 7. So I'm not going to do exactly the same thing as I did with XP. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, now I want Office 2010 to be installed locally versus the other model, and the other 2 guys to be app V. Interesting. So I don't have any more remote app for Office. I have Office 2003, 2007 as an app V machine, and I have local install of 2010. It's just an example. I have all my security settings apply, and as you can see here, now I'm running natively IE8, and I'm running as a remote app IE7. And that's a very clean, elegant solution for the problems with IE7. We've seen many people do remote app for that. Well, if we just continue, what happens now is we have every single program of 2010, as you saw. We can have 3 versions of Office running together, no compatibility problems. Everything is right there. And in fact, if I change anything of the application, like I minimize the ribbon or anything, and I go to another machine, those changes will follow me. Not on every application, because not every application is context aware, but at least Office is. So any change you make to Office, it'll follow you. So now we're going to do one more, which is that we're going to enable in Active Directory roaming profiles. Some people like this, some people don't. Let me show you what you can do with this, and then you decide. And this is also linking. We're going to enable so that it depends on the user. If the user is in one network, like in this case he was in Redmond in Seattle, he immediately gets installed a printer. He doesn't have to do anything, just because he's there. But what happens when he logs off? You see, like right now, I'm saying, hey, Jeff, I know you're going to Singapore. Don't worry, I've enabled you, which means link enablement. So this guy is now going to just travel to Singapore. He doesn't have to do anything. And as soon as he logs into Singapore, you see what's going to happen is I not only, and this is very interesting, I not only have a different printer, so he's going to change the default printer, but I also am going to apply some group policies to his machine. Because guess what? In Singapore, there's a law that says that all the machines have to be green configured. And therefore, I need to change the power settings on his laptop. Cool stuff? So what I'm doing here is, as soon as he hits this network and he signs in into this network, look what's going to happen. I'm going to have a new background. So you see, now it's not Contoso. I know Contoso, but it's not Redmond anymore. Now it's Singapore. And I've also changed his printer, and I've also changed his power policy. So this is a great example just to show you an idea of all the good stuff you can do with existing technology. This is everything that I'm showing you so far is shipped. There's no new stuff here. Is that exciting? Well, I'm trying to show you that you have a lot of excitement already in your hands that you can use. And if you put it together, some really cool stuff can come out of this. Well, let's finish with going to, again, this is the WinFlip version. This is a thin client. So let's say he's going to a kiosk. Well, he signs in. As you can see there, this is just a Windows Fundamental for legacy PCs. This is just a thin environment, right? And he's going to go into the remote access. And by the way, I don't know if I'm going to finish the video because you're seeing repeated environments. But what happens here is very simple. He signs in, and you can tailor this SharePoint web part from terminal services or remote desktop services to your, by the way, every time I say terminal services, I mean remote desktop services, but I just use the old name because all of you know it, okay? So remote desktop services, you see I can access my applications. And some of these applications are going to be remote apps, some of these are going to be remote session, and some of them are going to be VDI. And you see I'm giving you all environments in one hack. This is the same user, and what's super powerful about this, I don't know if you notice, is it's the same security settings, it's the same compliance settings, it's the same configuration management settings, and the most important part, it's the same data security settings. And everything is following him, and I'm enabling him through 7 different types of environments. I'm letting him work in his laptop, in his work, in another office, in a thin client, and in this case, this is a remote session. And if I do finish this, which I'm not sure, you guys will let me know, is we just wait another 2-3 minutes, and this guy goes to his house and he connects to a VDI session. And he does exactly the same thing that you're seeing he does in every other one. What's nice about this video is you take it with you with the PowerPoint, okay? So you can show it at home. That's why we like this type of environments. And by the way, if you unmute it in PowerPoint, because it's embedded, you hear Jeff, okay? So you hear the whole story. So you can see here, again, now my printer is redirected. I could even have it redirected to the local environment that I'm in. I could enable or disable that. That's called Easy Print. It's part of the Windows Server 2008 Remote Desktop Services functionality. And again, everything is following me. Everything is following me. And the last piece of this demo is, again, Jeff goes to his house. Give me a second. Let me show you that. You want to see that? Yes. Wow, the excitement is massively. I'm going to get a terrible score for this session. You guys are going to be, this guy is great for making you sleep after lunch. So, that's Jeff at home, believe it or not. He doesn't read USA Today, but he wanted to, I don't know. You're going to see him in a second. He always puts incorrect pictures of himself in the wallpaper. Oh, damn, he didn't do it this time. So, this is his PC, and you can control this environment. I'm not joking. You cannot, okay? Legally, you as Jeff's parent company, whatever, you can't do anything to this guy. So he can do whatever you want with this environment, but then so can I on my HTTPS. This is the magic. I'm going to do this through tunneling securely with encryption. I'm going to give him a VDI environment. You see, it's the same thing. And he goes in and he connects to the VDI environment, which could have been the remote desktop. This is just to show you one more, okay? Don't get me wrong. He can, as you can see there, he could have used remote app, remote session, or VDI. Benefits of one or the other? Well, VDI gives you administrator access, the other guys don't. As opposed to that, you choose. There's different models, okay? And it depends on whether you're persistent image, pooled image, et cetera, et cetera. So with that said, you see, Jeff's environment is still there. Everything is exactly the same. And his whole environment followed him. Can I move to the next part of the presentation? Yes. Massive agreement. Good stuff. Whatever you do, just don't put on the evals that I talk to myself while I'm speaking, okay? That's not cool. Step 1, define where you are, right? Step 2, define where you want to go. Define what the profiles are. I'll give you a simple example. You may have users that have no mobility. Then why give them a laptop? Because it's cheaper. Fine, give them a laptop, but lock it down. Okay? You may have users that have no flexibility. They run one application. So that's your questions. How many applications, what's the autonomy, and what's the location? And then you decide, well, I have 4 types of users. Or you say, no, you know what, man, I don't have deskless workers. I don't have a factory environment. But I do have 2 types of office workers. I have office workers which are the regular guys, and I have office workers that I need to restrict the hell out of them and do a lot of compliance on them. Fine, fine. You choose. So that's why I said you decide which are your 4, 5, 7, 10 types of users. And once you do that, you decide what their profile is, and depending on each profile, and I know you've seen this slide before, what you do is, depending on that profile, what technologies you're going to use. Okay? So that's why I said one size doesn't fit all. So with that said, let's go to the last one. I love this one. I've had a couple people, once I do this presentation, tell me, so what the hell did you sell me? Nothing, man. Sold you nothing. Okay? Let's get this clear. There's one thing I try to sell you during the whole, whatever, 50, 60, 90 minutes. It's this. Let us participate with you. Let us work with you candidly, humbly, amicably, so that we respectfully, with what you have, build one of these guys. Which is not going to be 6, 12 months, whatever. It's whatever your environment dictates, okay? And it's going to have 4 components. It's going to have what is your architecture planning, what is your application strategy, what is your image strategy, what is your deployment strategy, and finally, but not least, what is the underlying infrastructure that you need to be successful? You guys like this or sort of? Not what you expected. You wanted me to do a couple of demos. I know. But you know what? I'm trying to be sarcastic so you wake up with me. Look, guys, understand. If you don't build the strategy piece by piece, it's way too big a monster to eat or swallow in one chunk. And that's why most of the time we can't swallow him, because we're trying to attack him from one angle. And it has 4 angles, 5. So, how can we help? We can help with technology, we can help with advice, we can help with guidance, we can help with tools, we can help with services, we can help with partners. We can help as much as you want, as long as you tell us how we can help, okay? The part here's a slide on tools. I know you've seen and I know you love most of these, and if there's one here or an outdated one or a newer one, it's all cool. We have a ton of tools that can help you. And you know what? I still find a ton of people that use tools in the market that they pay for them, and we have a free tool that does exactly the same, and most of the time even better. So check it out. Get close to your Microsoft representative, get close to your partner, and truly let us help you with some of the incredible tools that we have out there. Most of them are free, by the way, believe it or not, when it comes to the operating system. There's the optimized desktop scenarios, which is an incredible Excel spreadsheet that gives you really good guidance as to how to select your scenarios and your profiles, right? Look, you don't have to think that this is going to give you the whole 9 yards, but this is a really good start. You see my point? And it really points you in the right direction of what are the questions that you need to answer on how many profiles you have to end up with. And last but not least, there's a ton of good services that our Microsoft Consulting Services and partners can collaborate and help you. I'll give you some of the most creative ideas I've heard worldwide. There was this partner who was telling, I'm not going to tell you where, okay, because this is his advantage. And I can't give an announcement. I'm not doing an announcement here. This guy goes out to a customer and he says, I'll do your inventory management. You just have to have these tools in place. Example, you have to have System-Centric Config Manager installed and so with this characteristics, this type, this distribution, this type of error. So you have the pool, right? And you have the chemicals, and you have the cleaning brushes, and you have all that stuff. And I come in with 3 super specialists, which are going to be this 3 Microsoft certified up to the ears with 17 certification guys, and 17 of his cousins, or 32 of his cousins. And what these 3 guys do is they try to get out of the tool all the fidelity that they can. And let's say they go up to 80% fidelity in the inventory, or 90% fidelity, or 70%. Well, the 17 cousins or 32 cousins are there to go hand by hand and, just now do it by pencil. And it always happens something like this, but give you, 99% fidelity, 96%. What did you pay? You paid for a service once every 6 months. What did you get? A full inventory that you rely on. But if you just deploy the tool and then you cut down on people and then you hash it down and then you give it to another team and then you don't train, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, what do you end up with? Well, I can tell you what you don't end up with. You don't end up with an inventory, right? I'm in red, which means that these are my sources, believe it or not. I'm giving you all my sources, and this is my, thank you very much slide.